So a long time ago, when I was living in Kansas, I would go to this game store that was run by one of my friends. Um, they were working very hard to keep the game store going. It was also a coffee place and also an Aikido dojo because this guy was an Aikido practitioner. So basically, this kid liked Magic the Gathering, Aikido, and coffee, and just kind of made a thing that was all three at the same time. It was very strange, but that's not really all that relevant to the story. So one day I show up. It's for either Cons of Tarkir or Fate Reforged for a pre-release, and there's this little boy just hanging out there, um, just like and like talking to people about the cards and stuff. And so somebody is like, "Oh, are you gonna play?" And he's like, "No, I don't have any money." And everybody's like, "Oh, well, too bad." So I saw him and I was like, "Hey, if I sponsor you, can I have some of like a card that you draft, or that you get?" And I told them the card that I wanted, and the card that I wanted was an uncommon, right? I'm like, you can keep all of the cards that, like, I was basically just buying this kid and into the tournament, and in exchange, it was like a red-white uncommon that I wanted. So I'm like, well, if you get one, you have to give that card to me. But you get to keep all the other ones. So of course, he has to keep all his rares and everything. And so he was like, "Really?" And I was like, "Yep." And so we played, and at like during the tournament, the kid would just like come over and hang out with me, and it's like just fine. And he'd be like, "Hey, my mom's really pretty." He'd be like, "My mom, she usually comes to these things. Like, my mom likes this stuff too." And I'd be like, "That's cool." And I'm like, I mean, you gotta appreciate that try, right? I'm like, I have no idea how old this kid's mom is too. Like I was in my 20s at the time, and I'm like, I'm sure he can't tell how old I am, right? It's like he probably thinks that I'm like 40 because I have a full beard, right? So, yeah, I stopped going for like kind of like work and health reasons. I just like didn't always have a chance to go. So I kind of never saw this kid again. When I started going again, he wasn't there anymore. It might have moved away or just stopped going. But it's like, yeah, it's like that kid is like, oh man, how cool would it be if I had a dad who was into Magic the Gathering? I'm gonna try and hook him up with my mom. I was like, well, it's like hats off for trying, but I wasn't gonna marry that kid's mom. I can tell you that. So that's my story about we my wife and I, because I already knew my wife. We weren't together at the time, but I already knew her, so she was like aware of this story. So we call that kid the Urchin. So this is like a little card shop urchin. So this is what we call the Urchin story. It's a good one, I think.